Has the CEO of AMC finally found a way to dilute shareholders? When the apes did not want an offering, Adam Aron kept talking about how AMC needs to raise capital to pay off debts. I think that Adam Aron has finally found a way to dilute shareholders with this new special dividend. What is going on? The last time that Adam Aron talked about doing an offering, the last time he talked about raising capital, the price of AMC plummeted. Today, AMC trading at $25. We're taking a look at the chart and talk about the news here with this whole special dividend deal. What is going on? I'm going to break it all down right here in this video, so make sure you stay tuned. Pulling up the chart here for AMC right now, trading at that 25.19 level. What's interesting is the last time we got a big pop up here, we had that similar move to the downside. One thing that I pointed out on Stock Tweets the other day is how we had this big old just bad bearish candle at the top, looking very similar. It almost was like a perfect play out here, that it was looking very similar recently, but you can see how this $20 area, I posted on Stock Tweets how that $20 area needed to hold here for a possible move higher, and that's exactly kind of what's going on right now. So AMC holding that $20 level and being able to push back is bullish. Obviously, AMC would need to push above that $28 level next, but the fact that AMC was able to hold that $20 level and then squeeze up here today, that's a bullish sign. So I won't say that I think AMC is going to go to zero today. Obviously, in the future, I believe so. But right now, as long as AMC can keep pushing up here, it'll be bullish and it'll be able to squeeze up there above that $30 level. And then the next big resistance is going to be that $34 level. We've seen this with GME having some pops and then getting stuck multiple times at those levels. So AMC, if it gets stuck here at that $34 level, well, then it'll obviously be bearish. Well, let's talk about the news here on AMC, this special dividend, the APE. What is going on with the APE shares, all right? Pulling up Seeking Alpha right here, you can see the title of this article, AMC Time for Capital Raise. The reason that I'm pulling this article up is because I want you guys to see that I'm not the only person out there that is seeing what is going on here with this idea of the stock dividend, the preferred stock dividend being a new way to raise capital. The news came last week when AMC reported its earnings. The CEO's all fired up about this special dividend. They were able to kind of make a little bit more money out of the pandemic, obviously, but they're still losing money. Great at spinning the narrative here with AMC as well, and he did that on the conference call, talking about how great the quarter was. But one thing that he did not talk about was how the company's financial situation got a bit worse during this quarter. AMC burned through $117 million in cash during quarter two. At the end of June 2022, AMC had $965 million of cash on the balance sheet, but that was down, obviously, from the $1.8 billion that they had a year ago. One of the big things that Adam Aron has kind of talked about over the last year is being able to raise more capital by doing offerings, being able to sell more shares to get more cash into the company to try to get them to a point where they can pay off their debts. And it's pretty apparent that Adam Aron wants to do more share offerings. Like, he really wants to do more offerings, because the great thing about this is he knows that he has the apes that are willing to keep buying and buying and buying. Even though the company's not performing up to standards, the apes will keep buying. So for Adam Aron, he's like, hey, I have a unlimited money pot because I can just keep doing offerings and keep raising cash, and I can get to a point where I can dilute shareholders, and create a 5 billion share float. If he's able to do an offering, he can dilute the shareholders and then reducing the voting powers. Again, he can then do more. Adam Aron loves to post on Twitter about his chess plays, his 4D chess plays, which is always very interesting, because at the end of the day, the balance sheet for AMC is worse than it was in quarter one of 2021, especially with working capital now being more than $500 million in the red, and the balance sheet equity is at its most negative point since the end of 2020. Not good. And Adam Aron did not talk about this. Obviously, he only talked about the good things. He only talked about the dividend. So the big news for the apes is this dividend, right? This special dividend, which is very funny, because what he's really doing, what Adam Aron is trying to do here, is he's trying to basically create another stock that the apes won't have voting power, that he can then start to do offerings with. He wants to sell shares to raise cash for AMC. And like I said at the beginning of the video, anytime that Adam Aron has talked about dilution, it's not been good for the share price. And we've talked about this before. Dilution is never a good thing. Printing more shares, creating more shares, it's like inflation, right? If you have a 500 million share float and then all of a sudden you've created another 500 million shares, you're basically cutting the value of that company in terms of the actual share price. Like right now, if the share price is $25 and they're able to create another 500 million shares to sell to investors, well, then you would think that the share price would plummet to, $10 or so, $12, basically cutting it in half. And what's really interesting here is now with the APE dividend, this whole, I'm still confused. I think a lot of people are confused exactly how it's going to work. But what happens is if you own one share of AMC, you will then get one share of APE. And then you're basically creating 500 million shares of APE, and then you have the 500 million shares of AMC. So what Adam Aron's basically doing is he's just creating 500 million shares out of thin air, right? And that's got to have a value attached to it. There's got to be a value to that. So now what's going to happen is the stock price for AMC will get cut in half once that dividend starts trading, because then you'll have kind of like this imbalance, this arbitrage thing going on where people are trying to figure out what's the value of APE. If APE starts to sell off, if Adam Aron then starts to dilute, if he starts selling billions of shares of APE, which he says he has 4 billion shares, if he's able to sell billions of shares of APE, well, guess what's going to happen? The price of APE is going to plummet, and then AMC will get pulled down with it because they're connected, right? Like, this is not just like, oh my gosh, we're going to just make a fun stock for people to hold. Like, there's got to be a connection. There's got to be a value to that. And obviously, AMC is doing that with the APE now. So what people need to understand here is that this is basically dilution. This is basically a way for Adam Aron to raise more capital. And by raising more capital, the only way to do that is to create dilution. And anytime that there's dilution, anytime that you're diluting shareholders, you're decreasing the value of that company because you're creating more shares. So if I have 100,000 shares and all of a sudden you just made another 500 million, my 100,000 are less valuable because there's more shares out there. Supply, demand, right? So as much as the apes are excited for this dividend, they think it's going to just make this skyrocketing effect on the stock price, they really need to ask themselves, what is Adam Aron trying to do here? He's trying to raise more cash. And anytime that a CEO is trying to raise more cash, it's not a bullish thing, right? It's not bullish that Adam Aron feels like he needs, or he knows that he needs to raise capital. He knows that he needs to dilute shareholders. He cannot do that with the actual AMC shares because the apes will vote against it, because the apes know that if they get diluted, that by creating more shares, it'll obviously hurt the overall squeeze play here. The larger the float, if the float becomes, 1 billion total shares, you're making it that much harder to have a squeeze. Anytime you're creating more shares, it's going to make it harder to have a squeeze. I'm just putting it out there. The larger the float gets, the harder it is to squeeze because there's just more supply and then just not having that same demand. So with 500 million shares, it's okay. Let's see what happens. But once you have 1 billion, you have 2 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion shares, which is very possible because remember, they're going to create APE and then they're going to sell more shares. 100% Adam Aron will sell more shares. That is the whole point of this APE dividend. I'm telling you guys right now, Adam Aron does not care about the squeeze play. He only cares about raising more cash. He needs to raise cash to pay off the debts, to be able to handle the interest payments that are coming up. And that's exactly what his plan is for the dividend. As excited as investors are for the AMC, APE dividend, whatever you want to call it here, I'm thinking this is very bearish. This is very bad news for the overall idea of AMC squeezing to the moon. We'll see what happens once APE starts trading, but I would expect a lot of volatility here for AMC. And like I said before, AMC needing to push to new highs in the next day or so to invalidate the idea that it would start to sell off again. I believe that APE is going to start trading in like the last week of August. So like the 19th, they're supposed to start delivering the shares for everybody that owns the AMC shares right now. So let's see what happens. It'll be interesting. It's going to be very interesting, but I'm thinking that this is not a good thing for the overall Moass, right? Like this is not a good thing when it comes to the Moass.